Been a dramatic day of arrests in connection with that 2014 Free State asbestos project. Hope, of course, that after years of jaw-dropping testimony at the State Capture Commission, we might be seeing accountability at last. But will the arrests lead to successful prosecutions? Let's talk now to the spokesperson for the NPA, the National Prosecuting Authority, Sipho Ngwema. Good evening, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. You know, Hermione Cronje promised arrest before the end of September. I'm guessing it's been a really satisfying day at the office.
Good evening, Sally, and your listeners. Yes, indeed, for law enforcement agencies, of course, this has been long time coming. There's been a lot of investment with regards to investigation. The Hawks who have been leading this investigation have done phenomenal work from an investigation point of view, particularly the Hawks from the Free State. They have been working with the unit of the NPA in the Free State, the TPP's office, and also the LCCU. But also, we want to make sure that this matter is done and goes to court speedily, so we'll be able on Friday, when they appear, to supply them with the relevant allegations against them, so that as soon as they are ready, we're able to have a hearing with regards to this matter.
Could you confirm how many people you have managed to arrest today?
By end of business today, there were 6 suspects that the Hawks were able to round up. I believe that even the 7th has made contact or had made contact with the investigators, so the relevant logistics were being discussed in terms of how does that person make sure that he's secured by the Hawks. So I'm fairly certain that by Friday, when the suspects appear in court, everyone who has to be there.
The Estina Dairy arrests. Have you got a strong case?
The law enforcement agencies have learned their lessons with regards to how they have handled certain cases before. And this is why we have been pleading with the nation, and still continue to plead, that allow the law enforcement agencies to invest as much time as it is needed in order for them to be able to investigate these cases thoroughly, so that by the time they arrest suspects, they are able to supply them, to furnish them with indictments. And this is what will happen in this case as well. When the accused appear on Friday, they will be supplied with charge sheets, which will then specify exactly the charges they would be facing, and the state is virtually ready to proceed with the trial. So the amount of investment made in this investigation by the Hawks is so phenomenal that it's easier now, because it has been guided by prosecutors in the Free State, so that by the time they get to this milestone, they are almost ready to proceed with the trial. So by the information that they would have received through the search and seizure today, if it will affect issues going forward, but basically the case is ready. The prosecution and the investigating team are ready. They have done phenomenal work to make sure that there are no delays. What we want to avoid is delays. What we want to avoid is embarrassments of cases being withdrawn because of further investigation. So work has been done. The prosecution service and the investigating team, they are of the view that they can be able to present before court a case with reasonable prospects of success. So they will be supplying the accused, as I said, and they will be then be working towards getting a trial date as soon as possible, so that this matter can be dealt with speedily. The people of South Africa deserve to hear justice on these matters, and this is why investigators spend time. They go through the fine tooth comb in terms of making sure that the evidence is sifted through, the credible evidence and witnesses, in order to make sure that these cases are dealt with in the manner that they should.
Sounds thorough, which is great news. Is it just coincidence that this week we heard from Edwin Sodi of Blackhead Consulting, who was talking about exactly what was going on with that asbestos project? I mean, you've been doing the investigations, or the Hawks have, for absolutely months now. Is it just coincidence, or is it important that that testimony came out at State Capture? Because we know that evidence led at the State Capture Commission can now be used in prosecutions. I'm right?
The investigating team and prosecution team were ready to proceed with this matter at a particular point, but they had to allow certain processes to unfold, so that we don't see we don't interrupt certain processes that also have got an interest on this particular matter. But there's no doubt that we have been fairly ready for a while, and this is why we were able to act today as law enforcement agencies once that particular witness, which was before the commission in the past few days, had finished testifying. And therefore, because we have got many other cases that we have to deal with, we have got many other issues on this particular matter that needs to be finalized. There are many other actions that need to take place, and therefore it was important that as soon as people are done with the commission with regard to this particular matter, the law on the criminal processes, then they take effect so that we are able to move to other matters that also need similar attention and action.
Speaking of other matters, we know that there's a likelihood of more arrests from the Hawks. Are you able to confirm how soon that might happen, and whether high-profile former politicians from the Free State, including perhaps the Premier, Ace Magashule, is on the list of who might be next?
It's never advisable for any investigation, to mention people that you think may be arrested, because if you are ready, then go and arrest them. But we will make those announcements at the time we reach those milestones. But I have no doubt that there will be actions that will speak to the issues that are happening with regards to corruption, and so that we ask those who are responsible to be able to account. So there will be people before court. In the next few days, you will see actions from law enforcement officers making sure that those who are implicated in wrongdoing, they answer. But in terms of the specifics that you have asked, we never mention who the suspects are, because sometimes it can be seen as if we have a witch hunt on certain people. So once we are done investigations, we'll take actions. And like now, when we are done, you will know through the actions that we are going to take.
Thank you so much for your time this evening. We do appreciate it. Spokesperson for the National Prosecuting Authority, Sipho Ngwema. Well, also joining us this evening is someone who's written extensively on Free State corruption, investigative journalist with the Daily Maverick and author Pieter Louis Myburgh. His book, Gangster State, detailed much of the information coming out of the State Capture Commission and, of course, around the Hawks arrest today. Good evening to you, Pieter Louis. Do you feel vindicated tonight?
Sally, good evening. Yeah, there certainly is a sense of vindication. You recall that when the book was published in early 2018, it was certainly met by a strong sense of disgruntlement and very strong emotions on behalf of those who supported the likes of Premier Ace Magashule, even threats to, burn the book and such. And of course, the book was branded as a heap of lies. So it's always a very welcome turn of events for an investigative journalist or a researcher when a law enforcement body, seriously takes a look at some of the revelations that we bring about with our research and, ultimately, slams a seal of approval on it in the sense that it's been deemed to be serious enough to lead to a proper investigation and then also prosecutions. So certainly a sense of vindication, but also a sense of satisfaction in a broader sense that the law enforcement environment seems to be waking from its Zuma years slumber and are apparently starting to do their jobs and, researching or properly investigating high-level corruption.
It was certainly interesting hearing Sipho Ngwema saying they've learnt their lesson from what happened with the Estina dairy farm, where that case basically collapsed. And he was at pains to go through the very detail that they've got and that they want to prosecute quickly. Do you have more hope that not only will we see quick prosecutions, but more arrests?
Yeah, look, I think there's a couple of issues at play we have to consider. The National Prosecuting Authority and the Hawks, the kind of organizations, they have been struggling with capacity constraints, a lack of personnel, lack of expertise. And there has been a very deliberate attempt by government to recapacitate those organizations. So that certainly instills a sense of optimism going forward. We know that there's a formalized cooperation agreement, for instance, between Zondo Commission investigators and those who find themselves at bodies like the eNCA and the Hawks. So definitely, I think in terms of a readiness and an ability level, we are pretty much at as good a position as we have been in quite a couple of years in terms of the readiness and capability of these organizations to prosecute top-level corruption.
Obviously, Sipho Ngwema would not be drawn on who might be next, but I can ask you, of course. Your book, Gangster State, was unraveling Ace Magashule's web of capture. It details a lot of what is coming out now and puts Ace Magashule as the kingpin. Do you think that his arrest is imminent?
Well, we can only speculate, Sally. Certainly there's been a lot of speculation around that today, naturally. But what I would venture to say, that would be a question that only the NPA or the horse could answer. But what I would say is that the involvement of Mr. Ace Magashule in the asbestos saga specifically, this very issue that has now led to the arrest of a couple of people, is indisputable. I mean, there are emails between his staffers and the late Mr. Egon Bambani, one of the recipients of these millions of rands from the Free State coffers, whereby money was requested on behalf of Mr. Magashule, and this is money that came from that deal. So there certainly is involvement of Mr. Magashule. Whether that warrants, or whether that constitutes sufficient evidence for further prosecution is another matter, but there certainly is more than enough to start having a look on the law enforcement side in terms of Mr. Magashule's possible involvement and then possible criminal complicity in this matter.
Well, thank you very much for your time this evening. Investigative journalist with the Daily Maverick, author and journalist Pieter Louis Myburgh.